Top 20 worst cars of all time. Perhaps in life, each of us has a car tied to a memory, right? Dad's car, Grandpa's, the first car we drove ourselves, or simply the car we dreamed of. The world of cars is truly diverse and colorful, but alongside amazing machines that have become legends, history also marks some stumbles, models that make people shake their heads, or even become the laughingstock of their era. Today, let's revisit the 20 cars considered the worst of all time. Maybe you've seen them, heard of them, or even had not-so-pleasant memories with one of them. Let's begin this special journey. Chevrolet SSR. Starting our list at number 20 is a car that even Chevy enthusiasts have to admit was a mistake. That's the Chevrolet SSR. Appearing in the early 2000s, this car was a rather strange attempt by GM to combine the power of a pickup with the sporty look of a hot rod convertible. Looking back, it looked pretty unique, didn't it? It had a unique retro style, reminiscent of classic pickups, but with a modern body and a retractable convertible top. This was a bold idea, trying to create an entirely new vehicle segment, a hybrid of a pickup, sports car, and convertible. However, unfortunately, this idea didn't go as planned. Sources called it heavy, underpowered, and slow. Although later versions were equipped with a more powerful V8 engine, the initial version was still criticized for its performance. Its heavy weight overshadowed the engine's power, making acceleration and handling not meet the expectations for a sporty-looking vehicle. Its styling, while initially unique, was considered awkward and controversial. The hybrid look wasn't popular with the majority, making it the subject of much discussion, not in a positive way. Despite having an interior considered quite luxurious, this wasn't enough to save its other weaknesses. The SSR still didn't sell as expected, with only fewer than 10,000 units per year. Low sales indicated the market didn't really embrace this combination idea. Some critics even considered it pointless, questioning the purpose of such a car's existence. Ultimately, it went down in history as an unsuccessful experiment by Chevy, a reminder that sometimes ideas that are too unique and blend too many elements may not be the formula for success. Ford Mustang II. When people think of the Ford Mustang, they usually imagine powerful and attractive muscle cars. However, the second generation is a completely different story. The second generation, the Ford Mustang II, is considered a disgrace to the lineage. This car was born in the mid-1970s, a challenging time for the auto industry. It was during the energy crisis, and new emissions regulations limited engine performance. The Mustang II was designed to be more fuel efficient to meet market demand amid rising gas prices. However, to do that, Ford reduced quality as well. One of the most controversial decisions was that it was built on the platform of the Ford Pinto, another model with a bad reputation for quality and safety. We'll talk about the Pinto later in this list. Using the platform of a small, cheap car lost the powerful pony car essence of the original Mustang. The Mustang II was rated as having poor handling and a weak engine. The engines had small displacement and low power, not providing the sporty driving feel expected from a Mustang. Build quality was also a big problem. Although it sold well and was initially well received, possibly due to the demand for fuel-efficient cars at the time, today it is heavily criticized. Mustang enthusiasts consider it a terrible car, an anomaly in the glorious history of the lineage. Even its win of the 1974 Motor Trend Car of the Year award is considered embarrassing, showing the difference between initial perception and historical view. Saturn Ion. Let's talk about a brand that once promised something different, but ended in disappointment. Perhaps many still remember the Saturn brand with its promise of a different car buying experience, with no haggling. However, the Saturn Ion, launched in the early 2000s, became a big disappointment. This was one of the last models from Saturn before the brand faded away, and it seems to have contributed to that collapse. The Ion was criticized for poor build quality. Interior and exterior parts were loosely assembled, giving a cheap feel. The interior was described as awful, using hard, unappealing plastic materials lacking refinement. The overall design of the car was also not attractive, lacking personality and looking quite ordinary. The cheap plastic exterior was a major drawback, not just in feel, but also in durability. The car's handling was also poor, providing an uncertain driving feel and lacking connection to the road surface. More seriously, it was linked to safety issues, with a series of recalls. The most notable was the faulty ignition switch, a serious problem that caused fatalities and was one of GM's major scandals. Sources called it boring, a car lacking highlights and failing to evoke positive emotions. It was even said to haunt former owners with the troubles it brought. Some unusual design details, like the instrument panel placed in the center instead of in front of the driver, were also criticized for making it difficult to monitor driving information. Overall, the Saturn Ion is a typical example of how excessive cost-cutting led to a low-quality, unsafe, and failed product in the market. Eagle Premier.
Best domestic four-door sedan in America. Next to new Eagle Premier, the competition just fades away.
The Eagle Premier was the product of a collaboration between American Motors, AMC, an American automaker, and the French brand Renault, before Chrysler acquired AMC in 1987. Initially, this car received some positive reviews. It was designed by Giorgetto Giugiaro of Ital Design, a famous designer, and had a modern styling at the time. The car's interior was said to be quite luxurious, providing a more upscale feel compared to American models in the same segment. However, the Premier also had many weaknesses. One of the controversial design features was the gear shifter placement on the dashboard, a rather strange position unfamiliar to traditional drivers. The car was rated as having high fuel consumption compared to its contemporaries, which wasn't favored in a market increasingly concerned with fuel efficiency. The dashboard itself didn't always work smoothly, experiencing reliability issues with the electrical system and indicators. Although the Eagle Premier was the technical basis for successful later Chrysler LH models like the Dodge Intrepid and Chrysler Concorde, it was a commercial failure itself. Sales did not meet expectations, and the Eagle brand did not last long under Chrysler. The Premier was judged to lack identity and be boring, failing to make its own mark in the competitive market. TheStreet.com even called it the worst car of all time, describing it as a symbol of indifference and pointlessness. Chrysler PT Cruiser. Here we have a car with a retro design style that went spectacularly wrong. Retro design can look great when done right, like the Fiat 500, for example. But the Chrysler PT Cruiser is an example of how it can go tragically off course. Appearing in the late 1990s, this was Chrysler's effort during a time of financial difficulties and its partnership with Mercedes. The PT Cruiser was initially launched with a 5-door hatchback dark wagon style inspired by cars from the 1930s to 1950s. However, it was quickly deemed to have an awkward appearance. This design was controversial, unpopular with the majority, and quickly became outdated. The convertible version was particularly heavily criticized. Sources called it a very ugly thing to look at. Cutting off the roof damaged the original body structure. Not just in appearance, the convertible version was even more heavily criticized for its engineering. Cutting off the roof also made it lack structural rigidity, making an already poor driving experience even worse. The body twisted when going over rough roads, seriously affecting handling and comfort. The interior wasn't much better. It used too much cheap and brittle plastic, giving a feeling of sitting in a toy from a Happy Meal. Poor material quality and an unrefined interior design significantly reduced the overall sense of quality. The 2005 convertible model was ranked 16th on Edmunds.com's list of the 100 worst cars of all time, a sad position for a model that was expected to make a difference. Are there any cars on this list that you once owned, drove, or have a special story about? Please share your memories and thoughts in the comments below. Maserati Biturbo. We come to a luxury Italian car brand where an attempt at modernization ran into serious problems. The turbulent 1970s with the energy crisis forced many sports car companies to change. So did Maserati. They shifted focus from pure speed to performance, luxury, and more comfort. The Maserati Biturbo, launched in the early 1980s with its new twin-turbo engine, drew attention for its modern technology at the time. However, its first generation encountered serious issues. This car quickly became known as an unreliable heap of junk. Customers constantly experienced breakdowns, and the car required continuous, expensive maintenance. Common problems included fuel leaks, electrical failures, a classic issue with many Italian models of that era, water pump failures, transmission oil leaks, leaks from seals. Even the fuse box melted, a clear sign of poor assembly quality. The coolant temperature warning light often turned on even when the engine wasn't overheating, confusing drivers. The build quality of the first-generation Biturbo was described as approximate, a polite way of saying careless assembly and non-durable materials. Although there were improvements in later versions and successor models, the reputation of the first-generation Biturbo was severely damaged. It became a symbol of unreliability and high running costs, significantly affecting Maserati's image in the public eye. BMW Isetta. Looking at cute tiny microcars like the 1955 BMW Isetta, you might find them adorable, but perhaps they should only be admired in a museum. These cars are too small, to the point where they could be mistaken for bumper cars at an amusement park. This extremely compact size brings serious safety issues. It means that any accident, even at low speeds, can cause a disaster for the occupants due to the lack of crumple zones and protective frame. The Isetta also had unique but impractical design features. It didn't have reverse gear, causing significant difficulty when needing to back up in tight spaces. The most distinctive feature was having only a single door at the front, which opened along with the entire steering column and dashboard. This meant that if you parked the car close to an obstacle in front, such as a wall or another car, you couldn't get out or back up. Furthermore, it only had 3 wheels. Some versions had 4 wheels but were very narrow at the rear, significantly reducing the car's stability, especially when cornering or encountering strong winds. This car was produced by BMW, a company that initially made refrigerators and small trucks before focusing on cars. Edmunds.com ranked the Isetta as the 62nd worst car in history. Although the Isetta helped BMW survive after the war, it remains a symbol of the limitations and inconvenience of microcars. Cadillac Cimarron. In the 1980s, European luxury brands like BMW and Mercedes-Benz were very successful with compact premium models. Cadillac, America's leading luxury brand, felt the pressure and rushed to introduce the Cimarron as an attempt to compete in this emerging segment. However, this turned out to be a big mistake. The Cimarron was essentially just a Chevrolet Cavalier dressed up and sold at twice the price. The Cavalier was a common, inexpensive model from Chevrolet. Cadillac's mere act of adding a few trim pieces, leather seats, and a Cadillac logo to a basic platform was considered a blatant insult to Cadillac's illustrious name and luxury tradition. This car had poor build quality, inheriting many problems from the Cavalier platform. Performance was terrible, with a weak engine and poor handling, completely unworthy of a car wearing the luxury badge. The Cimarron's appearance was also very boring, lacking any distinctive features or luxury. Even GM engineers hated working on it, perhaps because they understood the car's disguised nature. Forbes called it a legendary failure, a classic example of lazy platform reuse. The Cimarron's failure seriously damaged Cadillac's reputation. It took the brand a long time to regain customer and expert trust after the stumble of the Cimarron. Ford Edsel Corsair, 1958. The name Edsel has long been synonymous with failure in the American auto industry. Although Ford invested $400 million, a huge sum in the 1950s, and heavily promoted this new brand, the result was a commercial disaster. The 1958 Edsel Corsair was part of that sad story. The Edsel was expected to help Ford compete better with GM and Chrysler brands in the mid-range segment. But in reality, they were just Mercury models, another Ford brand, disguised with some styling changes and sold at a higher price. This made customers feel they weren't getting a truly new or worthwhile product for their money. This car was launched at an unfavorable time. The US was experiencing an economic recession, which significantly reduced demand for expensive mid-size cars. Ford misjudged the market. Although the Edsel wasn't technically a bad car, it was a major marketing failure. The advertising campaign created overly high expectations that the actual product couldn't meet. The car also didn't meet customer expectations for distinctiveness and value. Additionally, the Edsel also suffered from build quality issues in its initial models. The most mocked feature was the front grille. It was compared to unsightly images, like a toilet or female genitalia. This shows the lack of refinement in the design and its strong ability to make a negative impression on the public. The failure of the Edsel caused significant financial losses for Ford and led to the bankruptcy of many dealerships that had invested in the brand. The Edsel is an expensive lesson in market research, product positioning, and design. Pontiac Aztek. Perhaps you remember this car from the show Breaking Bad, right? The Pontiac Aztek, launched in 2001, is one of the most intensely controversial cars in terms of appearance. Many consider it one of the ugliest cars ever made. Sources describe it with unflattering images, a weird three-eyed monster, or a mid-size SUV that looks like a combination of a minivan and a station wagon. This design was the result of an attempt to reconcile many different ideas, trying to create a versatile vehicle, but ultimately resulting in an unsightly shape. Even Consumer Reports staff were reluctant to drive it during the day, showing the level of its weirdness in the public eye. Although some tried to defend the Aztek, saying it had spacious usability, it was quite versatile inside with features like an integrated camping tent or a cooler, and some good technical aspects, its design was the most heavily criticized point. It was called awkward, unattractive, and looked like an angry kitchen appliance. The Aztek may have been ahead of its time in some aspects of versatile design, but its failure, primarily due to its unaccepted appearance, contributed to the demise of the Pontiac brand. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. Hummer H2. In the early 2000s, the trend of large, imposing vehicles boomed in the US, and the Hummer H2, launched in 2002, was a symbol of that era. This was a civilian version of a military vehicle, the Humvee. The H2 had a very large and attention-grabbing appearance, conveying a sense of strength and dominance. However, it was quickly criticized for its terrible fuel economy. With a large V8 engine and heavy weight, the H2's gas mileage was extremely poor, unsuitable for daily driving. It also lacked practicality for daily driving due to its bulky size, difficulty parking, and limited visibility. The H2 was considered a symbol of excessive consumption and environmental insensitivity. Amid growing environmental concerns and rising fuel prices, the image of a car drinking gas like water became negative. Although it had good off-road capability, inherited from its military roots, the H2's interior was rated as cramped relative to its exterior size, and used cheap materials. The discrepancy between the imposing exterior and the less than luxurious, cramped interior disappointed consumers. It was considered too big, too militaristic, openly contemptuous of the common good. The failure in image and sales, after the initial boom period, of the Hummer H2 caused significant financial losses for GM and ultimately led to the discontinuation of the Hummer brand. Reliant Robin. In the UK, the Reliant Robin is a fairly familiar name. This is a small car with only 3 wheels. Although it was quite popular at the time, partly thanks to tax regulations and driving licenses, it could be driven with a motorcycle license in some cases. It quickly also became a laughingstock and was often called a 3-wheeled death trap. The 3 wheels, with 1 wheel at the front and 2 at the rear, made it extremely unstable, especially when cornering or encountering side winds. It's common to see images of Reliant Robins tipping or flipping over in TV shows or funny video clips, but in reality, this is a serious safety issue. The car's exterior was made of fiberglass, a lightweight material that provided only minimal protection in an accident. The car was described as fragile, easy to tip over. Despite being famous for its uniqueness and humor, thanks to TV appearances, the Reliant Robin consistently appears on lists of the worst cars due to its inherent design and safety flaws. It's proof that sometimes uniqueness comes with unacceptable risks. Trabant. The Trabant is a symbol of the old East German auto industry. It was launched in the late 1950s as an attempt to replace the Volkswagen Beetle in Eastern Europe. However, the Trabant became known for its outdated and inefficient 2-stroke engine. This engine produced thick smoke and was underpowered, causing pollution and not meeting the standards of more modern cars. It was considered unreliable. Technical problems occurred frequently. Sources even said that body panels could fall off at high speeds, an alarming sign of poor assembly quality and materials. More importantly, it lacked basic safety features like turn signals or brake lights in the early versions, which was unacceptable for a car on the road. Although improved over the years and having some nostalgic fans, the Trabant is still considered the car that shamed communism and a hollow lie made of worthless recycled material. Having to wait many years to buy a new Trabant was also a negative point, reflecting the inefficiency of the planned economy. AMC Pacer. AMC is often known for bold ideas, sometimes going against the mainstream. The AMC Pacer, launched in the mid-1970s, is a prime example. It was designed with the goal of maximizing interior space and comfort, especially cabin width, making it look very wide relative to its length. The Pacer's distinctive feature was its very large glass area, accounting for up to 37% of the body surface, with the passenger side door larger than the driver's side door for easier access to the rear seat. However, the Pacer's styling was considered odd and controversial from its launch. It was nicknamed the Mobile Fishbowl, or a glass globe, due to its huge glass area and round, unbalanced shape. In the summer months, this car became extremely hot inside due to the greenhouse effect from the large amount of glass. Although the Pacer had some advantages like fuel economy in the context of the energy crisis and spacious interior, its straight-six engine was considered outdated even in 1975, when competitors had moved to more modern V6 engines. This affected the car's performance and fuel consumption. Chevrolet Vega. In the 1970s, when imported cars from Japan and other countries began to compete strongly in the US with compact, fuel-efficient models, GM introduced the Chevrolet Vega as a small, affordable car to compete. Initially, the Vega was praised and sold very well, even winning the 1971 Motor Trend Car of the Year award. However, the joy didn't last long. It quickly revealed serious issues with quality and reliability. Its aluminum block engine was particularly prone to premature failure, often overheating and having piston ring problems. General Motors had difficulty manufacturing aluminum engines with consistent quality at scale at the time. This car was also very prone to rust, especially when transported vertically on special rail cars, Verta-Pack, where it wasn't properly protected from the weather. The Vega was called a rusty heap of junk and seemed to spend more time in repair shops than on the road. There were large-scale recalls and safety issues, severely eroding customer trust. The Vega's failure seriously damaged the reputations of Chevrolet and GM, becoming one of the classic examples of how American automakers struggled to compete on quality and reliability with Japanese rivals at that time. The Vega is a warning about the consequences of launching an unfinished product onto the market. DMC DeLorean. Thanks to the Back to the Future movie, the DMC DeLorean has become a cultural icon. With its sleek stainless steel design and distinctive gull-wing doors, opening upwards like a seagull's wings, it had an incredibly impressive and unique appearance that turned heads. However, when launched in the early 1980s, the DeLorean was a commercial failure. It was produced by the fledgling DeLorean Motor Company, founded by John DeLorean. The car was heavily criticized by critics for its performance not matching its sporty appearance. This car had build quality issues, especially with the electrical system and the operation mechanism of the gull-wing doors. Performance was disappointing. It was considered heavy, underpowered, only using a small Peugeot Renault Volvo V6 engine, producing only about 130 horsepower, and overpriced for its actual performance. The DeLorean was a slow car with poor acceleration, unable to compete with European or American sports cars of the time. It also had many other technical problems. The DeLorean is proof of the saying, "style over substance." A great appearance couldn't compensate for poor technical quality and performance. The story of the DeLorean Motor Company also ended tragically with John DeLorean's arrest and the company's bankruptcy, although he was later acquitted. The DeLorean is still a beloved car for its cultural value, but not for being a good car. Yugo. The Yugo, imported into the US from Yugoslavia in the mid-1880s, was advertised as the cheapest car on the market. The extremely low price was its main attraction. However, it quickly became known for extremely poor build quality and unreliability. Sources described it as a bag of nuts and bolts loosely assembled, implying that parts were put together hastily and poorly. The engine often had problems, difficult to start or running erratically. The electrical system was prone to failure, causing many troubles. And one of the most common stories about the Yugo was that parts could simply fall off while driving, from windshield wipers to door handles. The driving experience was described as rough and uncomfortable, with poor steering and handling, making the car difficult and unsafe to control. The Yugo became a common joke in comedy shows, movies, and popular culture, a classic example of "you get what you pay for." Consumer Reports, a reputable product review magazine, even recommended buying a good used car instead of a new Yugo. It's often called the worst car ever sold to the American public. Ford Pinto. The Ford Pinto, launched in 1971, was a compact car that sold quite well in the US, competing with imported small cars. However, its reputation was permanently ruined by a serious safety issue. The Pinto's fuel tank was placed in a position at high risk of being punctured and catching fire when hit from behind, even at low speeds. This design was said to be to save production costs. The infamous Pinto memo showed that Ford executives knew about this risk, but decided not to fix it. This was because they calculated that paying compensation for accident and fatality lawsuits would be cheaper than recalling and repairing millions of cars. This, when revealed, caused great public outrage and led to many costly lawsuits. Although the Pinto's engine was quite reliable and affordable, the image of burning Pintos was deeply ingrained in people's minds. associated with Ford's disregard for human life safety. Austin Allegro, and now, position number 1. The car that often tops many lists of the worst cars, especially in the UK. That is the Austin Allegro. Launched in the early 1970s by British Leyland, the large state-owned British automotive group at the time, the Allegro was expected to be a fresh and modern design to replace the very popular Austin 1100/1300. However, it was quickly criticized for poor build quality and awkward styling. British Leyland in the 1970s was known for management problems, strikes, and poor product quality. The Allegro was a typical product of these issues. One of the most controversial and strange design features was the unusual square steering wheel in the early models. The idea was to help the driver read the instrument panel more easily, but it was very difficult to use and provided a terrible driving feel. Although it was later replaced with a round steering wheel, the image of the square steering wheel became associated with the Allegro's failure. The car was considered horrifically ugly, with unbalanced body proportions and clumsy design lines. More importantly, it had many technical problems from the engine, transmission to the suspension, frequently breaking down. Some sources described it as hideously ugly. Despite efforts to improve through Series 2 and 3, the Allegro's reputation remained tied to waste, inefficiency, low quality, and the inherent problems of British Leyland. It is considered a symbol of the issues in the British auto industry at the time, a failed product that contributed to weakening the industry's position in the global market. 20 the stupidest cars of the 1950s you never seen before. Let's rewind to the flashy, futuristic 1950s, when cars weren't just machines, they were rolling dreams. Post-war America was bursting with optimism, and automakers went wild with ideas. Some were brilliant, others, not so much. From bizarre designs to features that make you scratch your head, we're counting down 20 of the strangest car concepts the 50s ever dared to put on wheels. Are you ready to visit these mobile disasters? If so, buckle up. 1958 Chevrolet Yeoman. If the 1950s were the era of American automotive excess with tail fins, flashy chrome, and space-age styling, the 1958 Chevrolet Yeoman looked like someone showed up to a fancy party dressed way too casually. The Yeoman was born with good intentions, to offer an affordable station wagon for young families. But in an effort to cut costs, Chevrolet stripped away almost everything people loved about their cars. No tail fins, no sparkling chrome, no two-tone paint. The Yeoman looked like a drab gray Lego brick, boxy, plain, monotonous. The inside was even more basic. No air conditioning, no radio, no faux wood trim. Everything was sacrificed for the sake of price. The problem was, even with all the cutting, the Yeoman still wasn't cheap enough to compete with better-equipped wagons from other brands. Its biggest weakness was its lack of identity. In an era where cars made bold statements, the Yeoman said nothing. It wasn't fast, it wasn't stylish, and it wasn't particularly affordable. It just existed, and then quickly faded from the Chevrolet lineup. It's proof that when you strip away too much, you can strip away a car's very soul. 1953, Willys Aero. Our journey continues with the 1953 Willys Aero. This was a small car made by Willys Overland in the US. It had an inline six-cylinder engine making around 91 horsepower. What made this car special compared to others of its time was its unique shape. Soft curves instead of sharp angles, a sloped roofline, and circles instead of squares. Inside, there was enough room for 5 people, and the interior was simple compared to larger American cars. However, the Willys Aero is often considered one of the worst cars of its time because it wasn't powerful enough. Its engine with only 91 horsepower made it weaker than the larger, more powerful cars popular in the 1950s. Also, The Aero's design was seen as outdated and less appealing compared to newer compact models. These challenges made sales difficult for the Willys Aero, and production eventually stopped just a few years later, in 1955. This led many to view this car as an unsuccessful business venture, one of the least successful American cars of that decade. 1955. Dodge La Femme. Next on our list is the 1955 Dodge La Femme, a large car specifically designed for women by Dodge. It had the same engine and transmission as other standard cars, including a powerful V8 engine with about 185 horsepower. Furthermore, the La Femme had unique colors, sapphire white and heather rose. The interior and accessories were also color-coordinated to appeal to female buyers. It included extra accessories, like a matching handbag, raincoat, and rain hat, along with other fashion accessories that women typically liked. However, the design of this car focused more on cosmetic or beauty items rather than delivering high style and performance, as expected. Sadly, it didn't succeed because it was designed based on outdated ideas about women instead of focusing on what women actually wanted and needed in a car. Instead of ensuring the car performed well and was easy to use, they focused on adding fancy accessories that weren't practically important. Everyone who saw or drove the La Femme agreed it wasn't worth buying. People thought it was just a marketing gimmick, not something useful for a female driver. 1959. Chevrolet El Camino. The idea of combining the utility of a pickup truck with the comfort of a coupe sounded great, in theory at least. That's exactly what the 1959 Chevrolet El Camino aimed to be, a stylish two-in-one vehicle, ready for cruising and hauling. But in reality, the El Camino lost its way. Built on the Chevrolet Impala platform, the El Camino inherited the flamboyant 1950s styling with massive tail fins, a low stance, and sweeping lines. But that made it look more like a show car than a workhorse. It lacked serious hauling capacity, had a small bed, and was too low to the ground for real truck work. Conversely, as a passenger car, it didn't offer the interior comfort or refinement of a traditional sedan. The cabin felt cramped due to the pickup design, impacting the driver's experience. Not quite a car, not quite a truck. The concept was bold, but the 59 El Camino proved one thing. When you try to be two things at once, you might not be good at either. 1950 Nash Rambler. The 1950 Nash Rambler was a small car made by Nash Motors. Its six-cylinder engine only produced up to 82 horsepower, not very powerful. The Nash Rambler's interior had a modern, smooth design, with room for 4 people and a unique wraparound windshield. On the outside, this car had a unique bathtub shape with sloping curves. Although the Nash Rambler might have been revolutionary for its compact, fuel-efficient structure, it wasn't actually popular. Many felt the engine was weak, struggling to go uphill or carry heavy loads. Due to its low shape and light structure, the car swayed a lot when cornering or going fast, which was quite scary. Furthermore, the Nash Rambler had many mechanical and reliability issues, such as transmission problems, suspension issues, and electrical issues. All these problems made the car less reliable compared to its competitors. The interior cabin was quite small, limiting its cargo capacity, making it impractical for most buyers compared to larger American sedan models. All these factors contributed to the 1950 Nash Rambler's reputation as one of the worst cars ever made. 1950 Nash Airflight. Next up is the 1950 Nash Airflight, a truly unique and different car from Nash Motors. It came with a 6-cylinder engine around 3.8 liters in size, making about 112 horsepower. It was said to be easy to drive and reliable. Inside, the Airflight had a large and quite comfortable space. One unique feature was that the front seats could turn into a full-size bed for resting or sleeping. On the outside, this car stood out with its unique round shape and sloping curves, which were supposed to make it more fuel efficient. However, the Nash Airflight is often considered one of the worst cars of its time. Its unique design was polarizing and not loved by everyone. Additionally, because of its heavy body and aerodynamic shape, it didn't handle or perform as well as other cars of the era. Some owners even had problems with the transmission and other mechanical parts. As a result, sales were poor, and it wasn't popular. Because of these issues, many people consider it one of the worst cars ever made. 1959 Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. In America, in 1959, the cost of a house could also buy you a Cadillac Eldorado Brougham. With a starting price of over $13,000 back then, nearly $135,000 today, it was one of the most expensive American cars ever produced. So, what made it so costly? The answer: sheer opulence. Interiors upholstered in leather, wool, polished stainless steel, and even a steel roof with bright chrome trim. It came with almost ridiculous amenities: a custom perfume atomizer, stainless steel cocktail cups, and memory seats. Each Brougham was hand-assembled, giving it a Rolls-Royce aura in an American shell. But beneath that lavish exterior were countless engineering headaches. The air suspension system was cutting-edge but notoriously unreliable. The fancy electrical features were super cool but extremely difficult to maintain. And the car's weight was so great that even the powerful V8 engine struggled to move it with confidence. City driving felt awkward, oversized, and cumbersome. Cadillac only produced 99 Eldorado Broughams that year. While it remains a rare collector's item, it never achieved mass success because it embodied a flawed idea. Too much luxury isn't always what buyers actually want. This car was a luxury disaster, a reminder that when you obsess over flash and forget function, you risk losing everything that makes a car valuable. Thank you for watching. To continue with more content, comment yes to let us know you're still following. 1955 Packard Clipper. Back in the day, Packard was the symbol of accessible American luxury. Their slogan, "Ask the man who owns one," wasn't just marketing, it was pride. Owning a Packard meant you were part of the elite. But by the mid-1950s, fierce competition, price pressures, and a changing market put Packard in a difficult position. To regain market share, they introduced the Clipper, designed to uphold Packard's prestige while appealing to the growing middle class. It sounded smart on paper, but in practice, the Clipper diluted everything Packard stood for. Its design wasn't bad, just too conservative. While Cadillac, Lincoln, and Chrysler were pushing aggressive fins, lavish chrome, and revolutionary lines, the Clipper looked safe, not bold enough to attract new buyers and not glamorous enough to keep old customers. Technically, the Clipper had a powerful V8 engine, a solid chassis, and features like power seats. But the driving feel and interior were just average. It didn't scream Packard, it whispered conventional luxury. The biggest mistake was market positioning. A cheaper luxury car sounds appealing, but in reality, wealthy buyers didn't see it as luxurious enough, and value-conscious buyers opted for a Ford or Chevy with a lower price and a fresher look. The Clipper fell into no man's land, a car nobody truly wanted. The result was poor sales and a damaged brand image. Within a few years, Packard merged with Studebaker, and by 1958, the name was gone. The Clipper, though not a terrible car on its own, became an unwitting traitor to the brand's legacy, hammering the final nail in Packard's coffin. 1954 Hudson Jet. Did you know that in 1954, the Hudson Motor Car Company made a car called the Hudson Jet? This small car was created to compete with another popular compact model at the time, the Nash Rambler. It had a 6-cylinder engine producing about 104 horsepower. Inside, the interior was simple but useful, with room for 6 people. On the outside, its plain, boxy shape and lack of fancy details earned it the nickname Drab Beige Box. So, why did the Hudson Jet make it onto our list of the worst cars? Well, this car had some problems that affected its reputation. It faced tough competition in the compact car segment and had high production costs. Additionally, its design wasn't very appealing, and its performance didn't meet people's expectations. The Hudson Company later merged with Nash Kelvinator to become American Motors Corporation, leading to a short production run for the Jet before it was discontinued completely. The Hudson Jet is a prime example of a strategic failure, focusing too much on business goals while forgetting the user experience. Customers don't buy good intentions. They buy what works and inspires. Have you ever seen any of these in real life? Your memories are really important here. 1956. Studebaker Golden Hawk. You might be surprised to see this car on our list. The 1956 Studebaker Golden Hawk was actually one of the most important models Studebaker released that year. It came equipped with a powerful 352 cubic inch Packard 5.8 engine, producing up to 275 horsepower. Buyers could choose between a 3-speed manual or automatic transmission. Inside, it featured a distinctive engine-turned dashboard design and offered more options than the earlier Studebaker Speedster. While many consider the Golden Hawk an impressive car, it's also often listed among the worst cars of its era. The main reason? Studebaker Packard was struggling to compete with giants like GM, Ford, and Chrysler. That pressure impacted everything, from how the Golden Hawk was built to how it was marketed. On top of that, the car cost more than its competitors, which likely turned off potential buyers. To cut costs, Studebaker removed some standard features found in the Speedster, like turn signals, which became optional. Many saw this as a cost-cutting move that hurt overall quality. The styling of the Hawk series from 1956 to 1961 also sparked mixed reactions, with some calling it clunky or overstyled compared to the sleek original Louis coupe design. In the end, a mix of high pricing, reduced features, divisive design, and intense competition led to the Golden Hawk's commercial disappointment, making it a cautionary tale from the mid-1950s auto industry. 1958 Lincoln Continental Mark III. Some cars make you feel like royalty behind the wheel, but the Mark III, it made you feel like you were commanding a battleship. Nearly 20 feet long and weighing over 5,000 pounds, the Lincoln Continental Mark III was the definition of excess in both form and function. Lincoln aimed to challenge Cadillac with a top-tier luxury model. They loaded it with impressive features for the time: 6-way power seats, power trunk, power windows. On paper, it was advanced, but in reality, everything was either too heavy, too flimsy, or both. The boxy design, stunted tail fins, and tank-like front end made the Mark III look more like a fortress than a luxury car. And when it came to driving, its massive 430 cubic inch V8 engine couldn't overcome the weight or the shockingly poor fuel economy. Priced at nearly $6,000 at the time, the Mark III competed directly with the Cadillac Eldorado, but lacked the finesse to win that battle. Today, the Mark III isn't remembered for its success, but for representing an era when automakers believed bigger automatically meant better, and they were wrong. 1956 DeSoto Adventurer. With a name like Adventurer, DeSoto wanted to sell this car to thrill seekers, speed enthusiasts, people craving something bold and new. And to be fair, it looked the part. Sweeping curves, glistening chrome, and prominent two-tone paint made the car visually stunning. Sadly, the speed was only skin-deep. The rest couldn't keep up. Advertised as a high-performance coupe to compete with Corvette and Thunderbird, the Adventurer boasted a powerful Hemi 5.8 engine with over 300 horsepower, impressive on paper. But behind the wheel, it was a different story. Soft suspension, weak brakes, and a heavy chassis made handling feel floaty and completely unsporty. Buyers expecting a real muscle coupe got a car that looked fast but drove like a family sedan. This disconnect between advertising and reality was fatal. In the booming performance car market of the 1950s, the Adventurer failed to deliver where it mattered most and quickly faded away. What do you think about this list? Which car surprised or amused you the most? Share your thoughts and memories in the comments below. 1958, Buick Limited. Buick used to be the symbol of accessible American luxury, but this 1958 Limited felt like a tone-deaf attempt to outdo everyone and failed. At over 19 feet long and weighing nearly 5,000 pounds, it was more yacht than automobile, especially at a time when city streets and parking were much tighter than today. Under the hood was a 364 cubic inch V8 engine. Sounds powerful, right? But the fuel economy was ridiculously poor, often only getting a few miles per gallon. And while the interior was luxurious with leather seats and full power accessories, it still wasn't enough to make it a car you'd actually want to drive daily. The real problem wasn't just the size. It was the design philosophy. Add more chrome, add more bulk, add more flash. But the result was a cumbersome, expensive car that couldn't keep up with more balanced competitors. Buick only sold about 7,400 units before killing the model off in 1959. The Limited became a classic example of what happens when style overwhelms substance. 1957, Lincoln Premier. If you wanted to turn heads in 1957, the Lincoln Premier was your car. With flamboyant styling, chrome everywhere, and a colossal presence, it proudly declared, "I am the pinnacle of American luxury." The problem was, it was so over the top, it became overwhelming. Stretching almost 19 feet long and weighing over 5,000 pounds, navigating it through tight city streets was a nightmare. The front was bulky, the rear high, and visibility poor, making driving it feel like commanding a ship. Even with a powerful V8 engine, the car was sluggish and consumed fuel horribly, even by 1950s standards. The interior was truly luxurious, with thick, upholstered seats, premium materials, and plenty of power amenities. But behind the sparkle was a lack of innovation. While competitors like Cadillac were introducing advanced technology, Lincoln seemed stuck in place. With a high price tag, oversized chassis, and poor real-world performance, the Premier couldn't compete. Today, it's remembered as a relic of an era when American automakers chose big, bold, and flashy over refinement and efficiency. 1953, Kaiser Frazer, Henry J., or Corsair. Henry J. sounds like an old friend, but in reality, it was an ambitious but ultimately failed attempt by a small automaker trying to survive against Detroit's Big Three. Kaiser Frazer built the Henry J as a genuinely cheap car, compact, minimalist, and inexpensive to produce. Their idea was, if we cut enough features, we can sell a new car for almost the price of a used one. A bold strategy. But they forgot a crucial fact. People don't just want cheap. They want to feel respected. The Henry J lacked almost everything. No external trunk lid. You had to fold down the rear seat to access luggage. No glove box, no armrests, no passenger sun visor. Some early models didn't even have roll-down windows, just a fixed pane of glass. By 1953, Kaiser launched the Corsair version, trying to freshen up the Henry J with bright chrome, nicer fabric upholstery, and a glossy dashboard paint job. But a nicer exterior couldn't hide the naked reality. The chassis was still short and awkward. The design felt unbalanced. Under the hood, the modest 4- or 6-cylinder engine delivered efficient gas mileage, but lacked any driving excitement. The Henry J didn't feel like an automobile. It felt like a transportation appliance. The fatal mistake was the price. Although affordable, it wasn't significantly cheaper than Ford or Chevrolet, which offered better-looking, better-equipped cars. As a result, the Henry J fell into no man's land, not cheap enough to attract bargain hunters, and not good enough to steal mainstream customers. By 1955, both the Henry J and the Kaiser Frazer brand disappeared from the American automotive market. 1955, Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz. In the golden age of American flash, Cadillac was the ultimate symbol of wealth and style. And the Eldorado Biarritz, it was the jewel in the crown. Priced at over $6,200 new, nearly $70,000 today, this was a car built not for driving fun, but for making an entrance. At first glance, the Eldorado Biarritz is a masterpiece. Soaring tail fins, gleaming chrome, stylish two-door convertible shape. But look closer, and the cracks begin to show. Despite a 331 cubic inch V8 engine with 270 horsepower, the car was too heavy to be nimble. The wide body and low ground clearance made city driving a chore. The biggest issue? You paid for the looks, but you didn't get real innovation. No groundbreaking technology, no superior performance, just flash. And that flash came at a price. The gold trim, leather seats, and custom parts made maintenance expensive and replacement parts rare. The Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz was certainly a status symbol, but it also represented the idea of buying luxury for the image, not the substance. A visually impressive car, yes, but ultimately a lavish toy built for showing off, not for real-world use. 1958, Edsel. Speaking of automotive failures, we can't skip the Edsel. Ford believed the Edsel would be their ace in the hole, a mid-range premium brand to fill the gap between Ford and Mercury. But instead of becoming a resounding success, the Edsel became one of the biggest failures in American automotive history. What went wrong? Ford placed immense expectations on the Edsel, but when the Edsels, like the Pacer or Ranger, arrived at dealerships, customers were stunned for all the wrong reasons. Its bizarre horse-collar grille was widely mocked as awkward and ugly. Critics called it a toilet seat, or an Oldsmobile sucking a lemon. Furthermore, the massive advertising didn't match the real-world experience. Priced around $2,900 at the time, over $30,000 today, the Edsel was advertised as a mid-range luxury car. But poor build quality, a fragile teletouch transmission, and frequent electrical issues quickly eroded confidence. Launched during an economic recession, the idea of splurging on an unreliable car didn't sit well with American buyers. Sales plummeted, dealerships stopped supporting it, and within a few short years, the name Edsel vanished. Ford spent over $250 million on this project, but it completely backfired. The Edsel became a punchline, a $250 million disaster, and a public embarrassment for Ford. The Edsel stands as a clear lesson. No amount of marketing can save a flawed product. It was a dream that collapsed under the weight of overconfidence and a failure to truly understand the customer. 1957, Ford Skyliner, retractable. Imagine driving a car that could transform from a coupe to a convertible with the flick of a switch. In the 1950s, that sounded like science fiction, but Ford made it a reality with the Skyliner retractable, the world's first mass-produced car with a fully automatic folding hardtop. However, behind the spectacular show was a network of headaches. The Skyliner's roof system was an engineering marvel. 7 electric motors, 6 locking mechanisms, 4 lift jacks, and nearly 600 feet of wiring. When it worked, it was mesmerizing. But when just one motor failed, the whole system stopped. Worse, the folded roof took up almost the entire trunk. Planning a long trip? Good luck fitting luggage. Add the extra weight from all the components, making the car heavier, less fuel efficient, and worse handling than regular Ford versions. Priced at nearly $3,000 at the time, over $33,000 today, buyers had to ask themselves, is that roof ballet worth all these trade-offs? The Ford Skyliner retractable is a perfect example that impressive engineering doesn't always equal market success. It's a cautionary tale. When engineers overcomplicate, drivers pay the price. 1951. Crosley Hotshot. It looks like a toy, but the 1951 Crosley Hotshot was once hailed as America's first true post-war sports car. It was born from the idea of Powell Crosley Jr., a business genius known for affordable radios and refrigerators. His logic was simple. If I can bring home appliances to every home, why not a sports car? The idea sounded promising, a small, affordable, fun-to-drive roadster for everyone. But in reality, the Hotshot became a classic example of how romantic ideas often clash with harsh engineering reality. Less than 10 feet long, weighing only 1,100 pounds, and it had no doors. To get in, you had to climb over the sides. No roof, no real windshield, no heating system. This was a car built for the brave. Under the hood was a tiny 724 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder engine, producing just 26.5 horsepower. Thanks to its lightweight, the Hotshot could still reach speeds of around 70 miles per hour. On winding roads, it offered an exhilarating driving feel. But on the highway, it was terrifying. Build quality was another weakness. The steel body was prone to rust, and many Hotshots fell apart within just a few years. With no side windows, no trunk, and no amenities whatsoever, owning one required real sacrifice. Still, Crosley was bold. They dared to be different. The Hotshot even pulled off a surprising win in the 1950 Sebring 6-hour race, an incredible feat for a car with lawnmower-equivalent power. 1958 Survival prototype. And finally, at number 1, we have something truly unique and never before seen, the 1958 Survival. This wasn't a mass-produced car, but a hand-built safety prototype created by engineer Walter C. Jerome. He was concerned that Detroit's lack of attention to safety had led to too many unnecessary deaths and injuries. After about 10 years working on the chassis of a 1948 Hudson, he created this car. The most unique feature is undoubtedly its 2-part articulated design. The engine and front wheels were separate from the main passenger compartment. This was intended to enhance protection in a collision. The front section would absorb most of the impact force in a head-on collision, and the bending of the articulated body would reduce side impact force. Another unique feature was the driver's raised, turret-like cockpit, placed centrally and offering nearly 360-degree visibility thanks to the cylindrical glass. However, this car was never produced due to financial issues. Estimated cost was $10,000, while a 1958 Cadillac Series 62 cost about half that. Some of its safety ideas, like seatbelts, padded dashboards, reinforced bumpers, and side marker lights, were mandated by the federal government a decade later. Although it was a prototype, the Survival still exists today. However, it seems quite difficult to drive. The front wheels don't turn. The entire front section is controlled by the articulation. Turning the entire front section to steer is certainly heavy. Handling and safety at high speeds are questionable, especially on wet roads. It's even doubted whether it's safe to drive above 40 miles per hour. The build quality is also quite rough. The Survival is an extremely strange and unique example of silly but well-intentioned efforts in the 1950s. Looking back at this list, perhaps there are cars you agree with, and some you might not find so bad. After all, judging a car sometimes depends on the circumstances, on personal memories. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next nostalgic stories. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video. Wish you a good day.